In the Kingdom of Benin, earthen ramparts and moats stretched for almost 10,000 miles. This isn't just some isolated structure, but a landscape reshaped by defensive lines. In 1897, Benin City fell to the British Army. By today, a significant part of this complex has been erased from the face of the earth, and outside of West Africa, it's virtually unheard of. And yet, this is only the first of 4 walls we'll be discussing. Grasp this scale: 10,000 miles, a distance comparable to the journey from New York to the Australian coast. This isn't a highway or a border drawn on a map, but a colossal volume of earthworks. Behind the project was a state whose name you're unlikely to find in American history textbooks. Meanwhile, in Frankfurt, the Frobenius Institute has been collecting data on this system for decades. This isn't a figment of imagination, but the result of real field research. I'm not mentioning this to cast blame. It's simply where the key question of this entire video lies. Why is the Great Wall of China known to every child, while the Benin fortifications remain in the shadows? And why did Benin become the most egregious example on our list? After all, geography is broader than one region. In Sri Lanka, atop a rock soaring 650 feet high, stands a palace with water gardens still functioning today. In southern Africa, a lost stone city built from 1,000,000 blocks without a drop of cement. In India, a cyclopean wall rises, its age a mystery, and its lower tiers have held the soil of Bihar longer than local records exist. 4 walls on 3 continents, united by a single logic. So, we have 4 dossiers before us. Each of them poses the same question. How was this even built, and why has the world forgotten about it? As we examine these folders, it becomes clear. The impossibility here isn't technical, but mental. We simply find it difficult to fit these objects into our familiar worldview. Case 1. Sigiriya, Sri Lanka, 5th century. The palace is not built on a hill, but on top of a solitary granite monolith 650 feet high. Cambridge University has been researching this site since the 70s, confirming its uniqueness. Try to visualize a sheer wall 60 stories high, and at the top, foundations, terraces, reservoirs, and complex garden architecture. Every detail was brought up there by hand. No special equipment, just muscle power, ropes, and calculations where the slightest mistake meant death in the abyss. In 1950, British surveyors began detailed mapping. Only then did the true scale emerge. This was not a modest outpost, but a full-fledged ruler's residence on a stone fang, complete with frescoes, throne rooms, and precise irrigation. A place that seems to resist any simple explanations. Dry physics comes into play. At such a height, the cost of delivering every pound of cargo increases exponentially relative to time and labor costs. Reservoirs filled with tons of water stand not on the ground, but at the peak of the rock. The stone blocks for the terraces are perfectly processed. There was no possibility of simply throwing a spoiled stone down and taking a new one. But the most astonishing thing is that the water system still functions. During the rainy season, the pools fill up, and water circulates through the terraces according to the laws of hydraulics. The distribution of flows is tied to elevation differences, the likes of which do not exist in the architecture of that era. Some call it a ritual basin, but engineers from the Vienna University of Technology see a precision mechanism here. Admit it, it's impressive. Creating a water supply system that works for 1,500 years without repair is not a task for simple craftsmen. This is the work of a master who understood the laws of pressure and evaporation and knew how to integrate them into the landscape. He turned the rock into an ally, not an obstacle. The main mystery is not how it was done, but why climb to the top when building below is many times easier? One who makes such sacrifices is not looking for a beautiful view. For him, height was a strategic element, protection, a symbol of power, and an instrument of dominance. Nature itself became a wall. Sigiriya proves a wall is not just masonry. It is the transformation of height itself into an undeniable argument. But if height can be an argument, what do we say about mass? Case 2. Great Zimbabwe, Southern Africa. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, a megalopolis of 1 million granite bricks emerged here. No mortar, no metal fitting of joints. Researchers from the University of Bonn have described this construction school in detail in their works. 1 million blocks. Ponder that number. This is not a random construction, but a colossal amount of work. Each stone was quarried, shaped, transported, and laid, and it all holds together on its own. The great enclosure stretches for 700 feet, reaching 35 feet high in places. This is not amateur craftsmanship, but an industrial approach to stone. To operate with 1 million units of material, you need not faith, but logistics, quarries, and strict quality control at the input. If you calculate, thousands of blocks were laid annually over centuries of construction, without electricity or steam. Only fire, water, and primitive tools made of copper and iron. Granite was heated with bonfires, doused with water to crack it, and then the blanks were shaped with chisels. At the same time, the walls do not run in a straight line. The famous enclosure curves, fitting into the terrain. Inside stands the chronicle tower, a monolithic structure without doors or windows. Not a crypt and not a dwelling, but a mysterious object whose purpose is not fully clear. This leads us to an important conclusion. The creators of this city had goals that do not fit into our modern understanding. And what do the archives say? The Portuguese in the 16th century saw these walls but couldn't explain them. They attributed everything to biblical kings. A typical approach. If a stone city of 1 million is found in Africa, then it must have been built by anyone but the indigenous people. This attitude dominated science until the mid-20th century. This is not just a historical detail. The second wall exposes an uncomfortable fact. Sometimes we ignore great monuments not because of their insignificance, but because they shatter our familiar historical myths. But if an entire city can fall out of sight, what prevents us from overlooking 10,000 miles? The third folder is the heart of our story. 10,000 miles of fortifications. Not a legend or a single building, but an environment transformed by generations. Why does the world know about the wall in China, but ignore the Benin walls? The Benin Kingdom was located in the south of modern Nigeria. For centuries, its lands were entwined with a network of moats and embankments. This was not a continuous line, but a complex infrastructure that united cities, fields, and villages. The system controlled movement and distributed resources, performing not only a military but also an administrative role. The Frobenius Institute, in collaboration with Nigerian scientists, mapped these lines, solidifying their status in the scientific world. Not a single excavator, no cranes. 10,000 miles. Let's imagine this construction. In the tropics, one generation after another cuts endless trenches. The earth is not carried away, but piled up nearby, forming high embankments. Rains wash away the soil, it settles, but people stubbornly restore the contours. This eternal repair is part of the state strategy. The administration, managing 10,000 miles of such fortifications, knows every foot and tirelessly monitors order. Everything changed in 1897 when British troops entered Benin City. The city was captured and practically wiped off the face of the earth by fire. The famous Benin bronzes, masterpieces of world art, were taken to Europe, where they still gather dust in museum storerooms. The walls themselves did not perish in battle. In the following decades, they were slowly leveled, built over with houses, and simply erased from memory. Agriculture and new roads absorbed the ruins, and the education system pretended that this engineering marvel never existed. Before us is a classic white spot in American school textbooks. And it's not due to anyone's malicious intent. It's simply that the concept of a pre-colonial African power that created a network of fortifications 10,000 miles long shatters familiar stereotypes. Such a scale cannot be squeezed into a standard paragraph heading, and anything that doesn't fit into the heading usually ends up in the dustbin of history as fine print. Let's be honest, we are dealing with blatant bias. Why is the Great Wall of China an unconditional symbol of progress for us, while the achievements of Benin only cause bewilderment? The answer is quite bitter. The problem is not in the quality of stone or earth, but in our selective respect for other people's histories. Recognition begins with us giving an object a name and status before it completely disappears. Someone might say, but it's just earth, not stone. Let's assume that. Earth is subject to erosion. However, properly laid soil can stand for centuries. This is not a reason to devalue the structure. It's a reason to admire a different type of craftsmanship, a deep understanding of soils, climate, and biology. This is tropical engineering, the principles of which you won't find in European textbooks. Here lies the third conclusion. Even if a wall is perfect in all parameters, weight, age, or length, it is doomed to oblivion if no one bothers to turn it into a legend. The first outcome of our investigation is obvious. A wall can be measured by height, mass, or length, but its place in history is not a physical quantity, but the result of our conscious choice. However, it's too early to relax. The fourth folder in our dossier changes the rules of the game. Now we are interested not in scale, but in the depth of centuries. Folder number 4, Rajgir, Indian state of Bihar. One of the oldest outposts on the subcontinent's map. Along the ridges of the surrounding mountains, a cyclopean wall stretches for many miles, assembled from giant stone blocks perfectly fitted to each other. How old it actually is remains a question to which science does not yet have a definitive answer. For comparison, Sigiriya is from the 5th century. Great Zimbabwe is limited to the 11th and 15th centuries. Benin grew for centuries, but its end is clearly fixed at 1897. And in Rajgir, the foundations are so old that conventional dating methods fail. The vector of discussion changes. If the first 3 objects made us wonder about the power of resources, Rajgir poses the question differently. Who built these walls even before we began counting civilization? Similar cyclopean masonry, huge, uneven stones without a drop of mortar, is found all over the planet, from Peru to Greece and Anatolia. And everywhere the same question arises. How and with what were these blocks hewn, if it's impossible to even insert a knife blade between them? In Rajgir, the factor of endurance is added to this. A wall that has stood for 3,000 years is a completely different level of responsibility than a structure with a 300-year history. The foundation withstood everything: earthquakes, frosts, endless rains. Ancient builders calculated loads that are now modeled on supercomputers. They solved the most complex equation in their minds, and time itself acted as the sole controller. Rajgir opens up a new dimension for us. The first 3 examples amazed with their dimensions, while this one demonstrates time not as a date in a textbook, but as an engineering principle. One who builds for millennia thinks in different categories of design and maintenance. Looking at these stones, we see the triumph of intellect that outlived the culture that created it. The difference is that the authors of the first three walls are known to us. In Rajgir, however, the lower tiers are so ancient that the thread of continuity is broken. There are hypotheses, there are scientific battles, but there are no specific names. There are no archives, only a wall that continues to withstand the blows of the elements. Here is the fourth point of our dossier. Monumentality is not just cubic meters and miles. It is the ability of an object to remain unshakable in the flow of millennia, even when the builder's name has been erased from memory. Time here is not an enemy, but the main building material. Now, let's put all the data together. Sigiriya, a 650-foot vertical, a celestial palace, and hydraulics still working after a millennium and a half. The main criterion is height. Great Zimbabwe, 1,000,000 dry blocks, a stone ring 36 feet high. The main criterion is mass. Benin, 10,000 miles of defensive lines, erased from memory. The main criteria are length and invisibility. Rajgir, mysterious megaliths whose age extends beyond the horizon of history. The main criterion is time. Height, mass, length, time. 4 variables of one formula. The German Archaeological Institute in Berlin views these monuments precisely this way, as a unified global system. Scientists compare masonry methods and operational cycles, proving that these structures are not random anomalies. They are different branches of one great idea that humanity developed in parallel on different continents. And here's the main question. If we see 4 limits of what's possible on 3 different continents, it's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. People in different worlds, without conspiring, sought a way to build an eternal boundary, using the advantages that the local landscape offered them. They found 4 different paths. In Sri Lanka, they chose height. In Zimbabwe, mass. In Nigeria, length. And in Bihar, precision and longevity. 4 brilliant solutions, but only one is enshrined in the Western cultural code. The others were simply ignored, not because they are inferior, but because it's more convenient to ignore them. The argument about lack of documents doesn't stand up to criticism. Benin has been thoroughly studied by the Frobenius Institute. Cambridge has been working in Sigiriya for years. The University of Bonn is researching Great Zimbabwe. Rajgir is documented by Indian archaeologists. But the result is the same. Every first grader knows about the Great Wall, but when Benin, Sigiriya, or Rajgir are mentioned, the response is only bewildered silence. A deficit of information has nothing to do with it. It's all about the chosen narrative logic. But the beauty is that the perspective of history can be changed without even touching the artifacts themselves. It's time to deliver the verdict. Before you is a full-fledged investigation, 4 volumes collected into one folder. And the essence of the accusation is this: 10,000 miles of path, 1,000,000 stone segments, 700 feet of rock mass, and walls of titanic scale whose exact age is still a matter of debate. These are not conjectures, but 4 undeniable physical constants. 4 walls are variables in one formula, and solving this problem gives a clear answer. The scale of a structure does not automatically grant it a pass into history textbooks. The largest object on our list turned out to be the least studied. The oldest of the 4 is the most unyielding for chronology. The one that is taller than the others still amazes us with its engineering thought. And the most massive structure was, for centuries, attributed to foreign authorship, denying its creator's talent. There is no insidious conspiracy here, only a certain filter of perception. But any filters can be replaced. The main thing is to be brave enough to reshape the familiar worldview when the facts literally push you against a wall. If I may add my own thoughts, I don't believe that people of the past were more primitive than us. Rather, it is our modern approach that is guilty of oversimplification. The four walls in this episode are not a mystical secret. The problem is that we have forgotten how to ask them important questions. We have lost the ability to be amazed, and without that feeling, any research reaches a dead end. What goal compelled the builders in Bihar to embark on a project spanning 3 millennia? What motivated the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Benin when they created a network of fortifications surpassing any borders in Europe? What knowledge did they possess in Great Zimbabwe to embody in stone what others would have been afraid to even write down? 4 solutions, 1 outcome. And that very question from the introduction is still relevant. Why is one wall known to everyone, while the others are forgotten? The answer is simple. Our historical templates are much poorer than what these people built from earth and granite. It's not that their structures don't fit into our worldview. It's that our worldview is too narrow for their achievements. In the next part, we will find ourselves in the very heart of these walls, where secret halls and corridors are hidden. We will not stand nearby or outside. We will go inside. 7.5 meters of rock above our heads. This is no longer just fortification, but full-fledged architecture, hidden within the thickness of the stone.